This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. Before we got married, all I cared about was my wife's beauty. After we married, I finally understood what it meant to feel pain and joy at the same time. She always complained that I never upgraded my car. Other husbands can start the AC remotely. She would say, I rested my hand on the steering wheel. This is our first car after getting married. She rolled her eyes. Cheapskate. When I gave her a perfunctory kiss, she glared at me. You don't love me at all. I pointed at my watch. If you keep delaying me, I'm going to be late for work. She was picky about food, couldn't stand the cafeteria meals, and insisted on reducing the dishes from 4+ soup to 2+ soup. Did you think I got to eat with her? Naive. I crouched in the kitchen, shoveling leftovers into my mouth, then sprinted back to the office. When I got home, I would change the bed sheets while she showered, and ask her if she wanted me to scrub her back. That's too hot. I pulled my hand back. She always liked her bathwater scalding. She glanced at me. You don't even have abs anymore. You're just getting greasy. I let out a dry laugh, quietly gathering her long hair from the bathroom drain. Afterwards, she would fall asleep instantly. I would get up to wash the dishes, mop the floor, order groceries for the next day. At 2 a.m., she would kick me. Water. Then I would accompany her to the bathroom. My friends all scolded me, saying I had lost my dignity as a man, that I'd always be the lapdog at every gathering. But they didn't know this. My wife Haley took over a bankrupt company at 22, and now makes $20 million a year. Her parents are in poor health, and she's their only child. If I didn't pamper her, who would? Haley suggested I quit my job to become a house husband. I hesitated. Before I got married, my dad told me, no matter how busy you are, a man must have his own career, until she handed me an RTX 4090 graphics card and said that classic line, I'll take care of you. My heart skipped a beat. At my farewell party, my coworkers all teased me. Rocky, you're going to be a legend among us. From now on, you'll game, work out, fish every day, living the dream. Seriously, we're so jealous. I smiled and nodded along, but kept checking my phone. Haley had said she'd come home early tonight. When I opened the door, the house was pitch black. My heart tightened. There had been a burglary in our neighborhood recently. I grabbed a shoehorn for defense. Bang! The lights came on, and streamers fell from the ceiling. I saw Haley holding a confetti cannon. Paper stuck to her nose. Our daughter Alice was shaking a bell frantically, and my father-in-law held a new camera, the lens cap still on. Welcome home, husband. She gave me a big hug. I set up the graphics card and downloaded Black Myth for you. I was so touched. Tears filled my eyes. That night, Haley curled up in my arms. It's so good to have you here. I kissed her forehead. From now on, I'll be your loyal house husband. I still remember the first time I went to Haley's house. Her bedroom wall was covered with sticky notes. Pay the utility bill on Wednesday. Boss Wong likes pu'er tea. Remember to buy calcium tablets for mom. On the fridge was an old photo. 22-year-old her stood at the gates of the bankrupt factory. Old workers with red eyes behind her. She once pointed to that photo, telling me how her father had a heart attack, and 37 old workers crowded outside the ICU. The youngest Uncle Zhang was 52. They said, girl, if this factory goes, we'll have nothing left but the trash heap. She knew then she would carry that burden for life. While she spoke, her fingers unconsciously traced the edge of the photo. Her nails cut so short they nearly bled. She still has that habit. After she fell asleep, I quietly cleaned up the streamers in the living room. I found a piece of baking paper with scrawled words. Failed Suffle attempt number 6. I squatted down, eyes brimming again. This woman who never budged an inch in negotiations had secretly practiced baking a cake just to give me a proper welcome home. Being a house husband was no easier than being a housewife. The Black Myth game my friends had all finished many times. I never even started. The fish food I'd bought expired. I didn't even know where the pond was. I still got up early to cook, delivered lunch, drove Haley, helped my father-in-law with rehab. We used to be so busy that Alice stayed with my parents. But now I brought her back home. I still went to the market, still dealt with Jack the Butcher recommending dubious miracle doctors. I thought life would stay the same, busy and repetitive, until a man appeared, stirring up waves in our lives. The man was Tony, Haley's new business partner. I wasn't jealous, not really, until I saw them through the glass doors at noon. He was leaning over, speaking softly to her, his hand resting naturally on the back of her chair. Haley often told me about him, how he had ways to get genuine German equipment at low prices. One night, I got a picture on my phone. Haley at a fancy restaurant, smiling as she took a glass of wine from Tony, with a message, your wife has quite the tolerance for alcohol. I stared at that photo for a long time, until I heard a car outside. I looked out the window, a black Maybach parked by the door. Tony opened the door for Haley himself. Under the moonlight, the Patek Philippe on his wrist glinted coldly. That was when I realized the hardest part of being a house husband wasn't the endless chores, but pretending nothing was wrong when I felt something was. Ever since Tony showed up, I'd been distracted for days. At the gym, my workout buddy squatted beside me, saying between breaths, we house husbands, when we get jealous, we have to swallow it. You know why I train legs so hard? I have to satisfy my wife physically and mentally. You know, I nodded mechanically, my head filled with everything that had happened. A few days ago, I went to deliver lunch as usual. Just outside her office, I heard Tony's voice. Boss Haley, this batch of German equipment will arrive next week. It's the latest technology. I pushed the door open. He was leaning over her desk, pointing to specs on a tablet. Haley looked up, her eyes brightening. Honey, you came at the perfect time. Tony secured this shipment at 30% under market price. Tony turned to me, offering his hand. Rocky, I've heard so much about you. The Patek Philippe on his wrist shimmered under the lights. His diamond cufflinks almost made me dizzy. My cuffs still had grease stains. I shook his hand politely, but my eyes drifted to the equipment box. Beneath the Made in Germany label, I glimpsed a torn Chinese line. XX Electronics Company, Limited. My eyelid twitched. Tony followed my gaze, expression unchanged, casually sliding the box aside. Oh, these are just samples. The actual shipment will come straight from Germany. Haley noticed nothing, still excitedly flipping through the documents. Quietly, I took photos of the box. That night, Haley came out of the shower, tossing a watch on the vanity. Tony gave me this. Says it's the latest Patek Philippe. She sounded casual. I think it's too flashy, but he says it's important for business occasions. I picked it up. Heavy, exquisitely made. At first glance, it looked real, but when I turned it over, the serial number was faint. I discreetly photographed it, sent it to Patek Philippe's website. The reply, serial number not found. I was puzzled, searched the model, and there it was, on a knockoff site, priced at 1,280 yuan. Description, grade 11 replica guaranteed to pass inspection. I stared at the screen, then at Haley, who hadn't noticed my reaction. Days passed. Haley grew busier, coming home later. Tonight, I have a dinner. Tony said an important client is coming. The German supplier is here. I need to entertain them. Don't wait up. Sleep first. At first, I thought little of it, until the day that finally ignited my fighting spirit. Tony is giving me a ride home. My chest tightened. I rushed to the window. Down below, a black Maybach slowly pulled up. Tony was helping Haley out of the car. Her steps were unsteady, her whole body almost leaning against him. When they came upstairs, Tony looked up at me, the corners of his mouth curving into a smile. Rocky, Haley had a bit too much to drink today, so I brought her back. His hand was firmly resting on her waist. Expressionless, I took Haley from him, murmuring a thank you. Just before I closed the door, Tony added, "Oh, could I trouble you to remind Haley to look at the files in this USB when she wakes up?" His eyes were full of provocation. When I used to watch dramas, I always saw the housewife looking pitiful when she found out the mistress was seducing her husband. Back then, I would get so angry. I thought, why not just confront her? Make that woman know who the real wife is. But now, the roles had reversed. I had become that pitiful little spouse, and I was hesitant. I couldn't believe Haley would cheat. I firmly believed she was just being deceived. At the meat stall in the market, Jack was chewing on a cigarette while chopping ribs. When he saw me, he grinned. "Rocky, you want spare ribs or marrow bones today?" I lowered my voice. "You mentioned your cousin at the electronics factory making white label goods." Jack looked proud. "White label? Let's be honest. It's fake. German, French, Japanese brands. Big names. We can do it all. Full paperwork. Legit as it gets. Quality guaranteed. Why? Rocky, you want something?" My heart lifted. I quickly showed him the photos I'd taken of that so-called German equipment. Jack studied them for a while, shook his head, and said he didn't know, but he could send them to his cousin to check. I thanked him repeatedly, begging him to tell me as soon as he heard anything. Then I waved my hand. "I'll take all the ribs today." Jack beamed. "Rocky, you're generous." I still brought lunch to Haley as usual, but I was more watchful. I waited for Tony to appear, wanting to catch any slip-up. Haley thought I was overthinking, even a little paranoid. She kept telling me Tony had led major projects at home and abroad, that everyone praised him wherever he went. She even showed me her search history. It was full of impressive titles. Annual Outstanding Contributor in Sino-German Trade, Huron Under 30 Entrepreneurial Leader, Innovative Industry Rising Star, Guest Lecturer at Global Business Schools. By contrast, my titles were Master of Sweet and Sour Spare Ribs, Best Son-in-Law at Selecting Produce, Certified Caregiver to My In-Laws, CEO's Personal Human Alarm Clock, Man Who Always Knows Where the Remote Is. Rocky, I know you care about me, but you're caring in the wrong way. I was just thinking. Stop thinking. The best help you can give me is to be a good house husband. Haley cut me off, but Tony said he graduated from the Munich International Institute of Management and Technology. But there's no such university. Rocky, that's enough. Haley was angry when she raised her voice. The collar of her blouse pulled open, revealing a pale scar above her collarbone. 5 years ago, when a supplier caused trouble, someone threw a glass bottle. She shielded me, covered in blood, still smiling and saying, Good thing your hands that cook ribs weren't hurt. But now, her expression was completely different. Rocky, do you have any idea how busy I am every day? The company is making money now. But what about next year? Or the year after? I have hundreds of employees counting on me to feed them. Tony has the resources to help. I'm already beyond grateful. I open my mouth. You just stay home. Make your sweet and sour ribs. That's more useful than anything else. She took a breath, glanced at me, and walked back into her office. I stood there for a long time. The lunchbox in my hands gradually turned cold, just like my heart. The hallway lights grew glaring, making my eyes sting. I looked down at my rough knuckles, still marked from a burn that morning. I suddenly remembered the crooked stitches. When I sewed Alice's uniform last week, it's true, I couldn't even sew properly. How could I possibly understand all those complicated business documents? The mirrored elevator doors reflected my image. A wrinkled t-shirt, jeans stained with oil, while Tony was always in a perfect suit, his diamond cufflinks gleaming in the light. Master of sweet and sour spare ribs. What a joke. Footsteps echoed at the end of the hall. I quickly wiped my eyes, set the lunchbox on the reception desk. When I turned around, I saw the company's vision stuck to the glass wall, to become a world-class enterprise. And what was my life's vision? Maybe it was just to stew the ribs softer tomorrow, so her stomach would feel better. Besides, that fake watch Tony gave her, Haley never wore it even once. When I was organizing the closet, I found it hidden at the very bottom of the jewelry box. Underneath, our wedding photo. On the back, her delicate handwriting read. The first time Rocky called me late, Haley had become even busier than before, often traveling for work. Alice had been taken by my parents to go on a trip, so I found myself with nothing to do. At the gym, my leg day buddy was training harder than ever. Rocky, I've realized leg workouts are way better than seeing any Chinese medicine doctor. Haley even praised my progress. I recently started doing Kegel exercises and combining them with pelvic floor training. I feel invincible. His chatter irritated me. I added another 10 kilos to the hack machine. Just then, Jack the butcher called me, and what he said nearly made me throw out my back. Rocky, my cousin looked into it for you. That batch of German equipment you showed me, it can be made. I froze. I quickly asked, roughly how much? The genuine imports go for 580,000. But if we make them here, it's half that, maybe even less. My fingers dug into the edge of my phone. That number was burned into my memory. On the contract Haley brought home, the unit price clearly said 780000. I pressed on. Can your cousin really do it? But Jack's next words made my heart leap into my throat. You came to the right guy. Someone actually ordered 2 of these at another factory not long ago. The buyer's name was Tony. Wore gold-rimmed glasses. Acted like a pompous ass. Jack kept going. That idiot still hasn't paid the balance. Now my cousin's getting squeezed from both ends. Searching everywhere for that bastard. My mind went blank. The gym's noise faded into the distance. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. I started gathering my things to go home. My gym buddy called out, Rocky, done for today. I grabbed my towel and wiped my face. I'm stopping early. My back feels off. He yelled after me. Then start doing Kegel exercises, man. They really work. Outside, the September sun felt dizzying. I couldn't help but laugh, the corners of my mouth lifting uncontrollably. It felt like standing in line at the supermarket and noticing the person in front forgot to pay for an expensive item. When I got home, I logged into the game I hadn't touched in ages. In the guild chat, my teammate Noob Don't Carry was complaining about a dungeon. I sent him a private message. Bro, could you help me look into someone? He replied instantly. Hey, missing person finally returns. Send me the details. I gave him Tony's name and Rasum. He wrote back, I'll get my guys on it right away. I'll tell you when I hear something. While I waited, I noticed the USB Tony had given Haley was still plugged into the computer. She'd looked at it here once, but never took it with her. My hand hovered over the mouse for a few seconds. In the end, I double-clicked it. Inside were several neat folders. I opened the one labeled Equipment. It contained more than a dozen files titled Original German Import. I clicked on a PDF at random. Though I didn't read German, the English version was clearly suspicious. I realized my English had gotten rusty from not working. I copied the text into a translator. The result startled me. The entire document was nonsense. Then I spotted a hidden folder. Its label read, Dear, this folder requires a password. I tried Tony's birthday. His phone number. None worked. On impulse, I typed in Haley's birthday 0929. It unlocked. My hands started shaking. When I opened it, the shock felt like an electric current. The folder was filled with photos of Haley. Some were side shots of her working in the office. Some showed her smiling at business banquets. Several were obviously candid. The nape of her neck as she bent to get into a car. Her face rubbing her temples tiredly during a meeting. The one that froze my blood was the newest. At last night's reception, Tony's hand rested almost carelessly on Haley's bare back, his knuckles pressing suggestively into her waist. In the corner, his other hand flashed a V sign under the table. While my blood pressure skyrocketed, a message popped up. Noob Don't Carry had replied, Holy shit, this guy's whole Rasum is fake. That Munich school doesn't exist. Even if if it did, it'd be a diploma mill. He's linked to 3 offshore companies. Looks like he's been laundering money. And rumor says he scammed a company in Shenzhen 2 years ago. The boss he ripped off is still hunting him down. I stared at the chat window. Then I heard a key turn in the lock. The door opened. Haley's cheerful voice called, "Honey, I'm back from my trip." Before telling her anything, I decided to visit the warehouse and see the so-called German machines myself. After all, Jack's story needed proof. Besides, as a fellow engineering graduate, Haley respected evidence. Late that night, I slipped into the company warehouse. The batch of imported equipment was stacked in a corner, labels boldly claiming "Made in Germany." I took out a screwdriver, carefully prying open one casing. To my surprise, the screws weren't specialized security screws, just ordinary hex bolts. Holding my flashlight, I examined the internals. If these were counterfeit, the detail was impressive. Then I spotted small text on the motherboard, "Made in Shenzhen." A cold laugh escaped me. I snapped photos for evidence, planning to show Jack's cousin later. Just as I was closing the panel, footsteps approached. President Rocky, the warehouse supervisor, also named Jack, stood in the doorway looking puzzled. "What are you doing here?" I quickly slipped the screwdriver into my pocket. Haley asked me to check if all the equipment arrived. He had me skeptically. "Tony said no one should touch this batch." "Tony?" I narrowed my eyes. "Since when does an outsider control our warehouse?" Jack didn't answer. He shook his head and walked away. I watched his back, a heavy dread settling over me. Even the warehouse staff were in Tony's pocket. At home, I lay awake. Then I saw Alice's smartwatch charging on the table. A sudden idea struck. I used it to call Tony's number. "Tony, it's Jack from the warehouse." I rasped. "Seems like someone's been messing with that equipment." On the other end, I heard clinking glasses. Tony's drunk laugh. "Relax. That stupid woman already signed the delivery. Once the collateral paperwork is done, the next step is bleeding her company dry." A woman giggled in the background. "Boss Tony's gonna make a fortune again." Tony lowered his voice. "Remember, delete the warehouse security footage tomorrow, especially anything showing Rocky tonight." As soon as the call ended, I hit save on the recording. When I looked up, Alice stood at the bedroom door hugging her teddy bear, her eyes bleary. "Daddy, why are you pretending to be Grandpa Jean?" I smiled and patted her head. "This time, Daddy has something big to do." I presented the evidence to Haley with confidence. Photos of the equipment, the recorded call. "Honey, look, the motherboard says Shenzhen, not Germany, in this recording." She glanced at it and sneered. "Where did you get these photos and factory pictures?" I took the internal photos myself. The butcher Jack's cousin handled this order before. My guild friend even found out Tony's profile is fake. 2 years ago, before I could finish, Haley slammed her hand on the table. "Rocky, enough." The room fell terrifyingly silent. The echo of her hand hitting the table kept ringing in my ears. The photos scattered across the floor. I bent to pick them up. When my fingers brushed her high heel, she jerked her foot back as if I were something filthy. "A butcher, an online gamer. Who's next? A sandal seller." Her voice was tight, each word forced through clenched teeth. "Rocky, these are your advisors now." I gripped the photo of the Shenzhen motherboard, creasing it in my fist. Do you know how many investors I met today?" She tore open her collar's top button. That was when I noticed a raw red mark around her neck, a habit from when she was under pressure. 7. Every single one told me my company has no investment value. The smartwatch on the table began replaying Tony's voice, bleeding Haley's company dry. She grabbed it and smashed the stop button, the metal band leaving a red imprint on her palm. "And this toy," her voice was shaking. "You think I can't fabricate this in 10 minutes?" I reached out to touch her shoulder. She recoiled as if electrocuted. That reflex made my chest clench. I tried again. "And Tony is likely tied to a commercial fraud case. A man named Lou is still." "Shut up," Haley screamed. My voice stuck in my throat. How could I explain that I'd been tracking her like a lunatic, waiting in front of her company every night? She grabbed her coat and headed to the bedroom. As she passed the kitchen, she stopped. On the stove, the rock sugar pear soup I'd been making at dawn every day for her cough was still warm. "Rocky," she said, her back to me, her voice exhausted. "You were the one who insisted on being a house husband." When she slammed the bedroom door, I stood there a long time. Maybe this really was all I was suited for. On the stove, the ceramic bowl cracked with a brittle snap, as if something invisible had finally reached its limit. The next morning, I still sent Haley to the company as usual. Tony stood at the entrance in a crisp suit, the diamond cufflinks on his sleeves still glinting coldly in the morning light. When he opened the car door for Haley, he glanced at me once, then leaned down slightly, his lips nearly brushing Haley's ear. His voice soft but piercing. "Boss Haley, don't let small things affect your mood. You still have to sign the betting agreement today." Haley nodded, her gaze never meeting mine, as if I were an irrelevant bystander. Tony straightened up, turned to me, and flashed a victor's smile, his tone as gentle as a benevolent gesture. "Brother Rocky, rest assured, I will take good care of Boss Haley." But his eyes were as cold and mocking as a serpent's tongue. After Haley got out of the car, he leaned his head back inside, his voice dropping low, each word sharp as a blade. "After all, you You only know how to cook pork ribs." He paused, the corner of his mouth lifting in scorn. "And I can cook an entire company." My fists clenched at my sides, fingernails biting deep into my palm, the pain doing nothing to quell the fury rising in my chest. But I didn't move, because I knew anger wouldn't solve anything. Only evidence would. Haley was already stepping toward the elevator in her high heels. Tony followed close behind, before disappearing. He glanced back at me, his eyebrows raised, as if to say, "What can you do about me?" As the elevator doors slowly closed, I stood there, took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and called the CEO who had been defrauded by Tony years ago. "Bame, it's your turn now." 2 hours later, I stood outside Haley's company meeting room. Through the glass wall, I saw Tony smiling, sliding a document toward Haley, his long fingers tapping gracefully on a certain line of the contract, as if inviting her to dance. Haley's pen was already hovering over the signature line. At that moment, I pushed the door open. Every investor's eyes turned to me instantly. Tony's brows furrowed, but quickly smoothed into that ever-unbothered expression. "Brother Rocky, this is an important meeting. Idlers are not." I ignored him, walked straight to the projector, plugged in the USB drive. The screen lit up, showing Tony splitting money with a group of men. Stacks of cash piled on the table. That idiot Bame. With a few tricks, I easily siphoned a third of the company's shares. The meeting room fell into a deathly silence. Haley's face drained of all color. Her steel pen clattered onto the table. Tony's smile froze, but then he let out a derisive laugh. "Rocky, you think a secretly recorded video will change anything?" Expressionless, I pressed the remote, switching to the next audio recording. "What's the panic? That stupid woman Haley already signed the acceptance papers. Once the collateral procedures finish, the next step is to drain Haley's company dry." Tony's composure finally cracked. He shot up, the gaze behind his gold-rimmed glasses turning sinister. "Haley, you don't really believe this is real, do you? With technology these days, anyone can synthesize this garbage." Haley said nothing. She just stared at him, her fingers white from clenching. I stepped up to Tony, my voice low, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "If you're so confident these are fake, you can explain last year's commercial fraud to the police." His pupils shrank to pinpoints. The meeting room door burst open. Bame entered with 2 officers. "Tony, you are under suspicion of commercial fraud. Come with us." I looked at Tony with satisfaction. Bame patted my shoulder, telling me I'd done him a huge favor. But Tony suddenly laughed. He glanced back at me. "You really think this is over?" His gaze shifted to Haley, lingering meaningfully. "There are things your wife understands better than you ever will." Ha ha ha. I looked at Haley. She turned her face away abruptly. I stood there, watching the police escort Tony into the elevator. But there was no sense of victory in my chest, because I knew the real battle had only just begun. After Tony was taken away, everyone else left one by one. Soon only Haley and I remained. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, her silhouette as thin as paper. Outside, traffic flowed ceaselessly, but her shadow seemed nailed in place. I approached, lifting a hand toward her shoulder, but stopped just before I touched her. "What did he mean by that last sentence?" I asked. Her shoulders quivered slightly. A long pause passed before she spoke, her voice hoarse. "Actually, the company was already beyond saving." I was stunned, though deep down, I think I had known. She pulled a document from her bag, handed it to me. On the financial audit report, bright red deficits glared at me. Cash flow broken, funds enough for only 2 weeks, overdue bank loans, collateral about to be frozen, the countdown on the betting agreement. If financing wasn't secured by the end of the month, Haley would lose control of her company. I suddenly remembered the year Alice was born. Haley sat on the postpartum center balcony holding the baby. 3 in the morning, still in a video meeting. Moonlight shone on her swollen ankles. She turned to mouth words at me. "Money for formula is enough now." I looked up at her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She gave a bitter smile. "What would it have changed? Could you conjure 1 million? 10 million? 100 million each?" I had no answer, realizing all at once I'd never really solved any of her problems. Haley slowly slid to the floor, the expensive suit skirt smudging with dust. She didn't care. Tony was my idea. She stared at her fingernails, like a child confessing guilt. "Half a year ago, I met him at a financing event. He said he could secure bank loans and bring German technical endorsements." Her voice grew quieter. I knew the equipment was problematic. I also knew about Bame's scam, but I had no choice. She lifted her eyes suddenly, red-rimmed. "If I didn't use those German machines as leverage, the bank wouldn't lend at all. Manager William only trusted international projects." I staggered back, a nauseating absurdity rising in my throat. She had known, all along, known Tony was a fraud, known the machines were counterfeit, perhaps even known he was driving a wedge between us. boss. And still, she chose to look away. For the company, for hundreds of employees, for the burden she'd carried since she was 22. She became an accomplice to a lie. Her phone suddenly rang. She glanced at the screen. Her face went pale. Manager William withdrew the loan. Other investors pulled out too. At the same time, my phone vibrated. Tony made bail. I looked at Haley. She gripped the betting agreement so hard her knuckles turned white. What now? I asked. She was silent for a long time. Then she smiled. A smile full of finality. Rocky, let's divorce. If the company goes under, at least you can liquidate your shares. Have something for the future. And she smiled at me. A single tear falling. They say, husband and wife are birds sharing a branch. When disaster comes, they fly apart. But when disaster truly arrives, how many can really face it together? When Haley's word divorce came down like an axe, I looked at her and laughed. Divorce my ass. She froze. In that moment, I almost saw her as she was 10 years ago, a graduate student, stomping in panic over failed experiment data. Back then, I'd just graduated with my doctorate. Something compelled me to help her redesign her experiment. Senior Rocky. She had looked up at me then, eyes brimming with tears. Can I come ask you questions often? Who could have guessed? Those questions would last a lifetime. I pulled her home, into the kitchen, from the back of the spice cabinet. I took out a brown envelope and slapped it on the table. Haley's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were the full shipment records of Tony's domestic factory, the forged customs documents, and the evidence that manager William had taken kickbacks. Most importantly, I had helped BAME gather complete evidence of Tony's fraud. Haley's tears splashed onto the papers. When did you? I crouched to look her in the eye. In all those moments you thought I was just buying groceries, picking up Alice, waiting for you. You really thought I only knew how to cook ribs. And then is there still hope for the company? I smiled, ruffled her hair. My love, did you forget what my old job was? The next morning, Tony swaggered into the company with his lawyer. Waiting for them were economic investigation detectives, customs inspectors, and factory owners crying over unpaid invoices. Manager William turned on him instantly. It was all Tony's doing. I have the transfers to prove it. Tony stared at me, pale as death. I waved my phone lightly. Yesterday, after his bail, I already knew what he'd try. I had handed all the evidence I'd collected to the authorities. It was exactly what they needed. This time, Tony completely broke, collapsing to the floor. A month later, the company received new funding. Ironically, the investor was someone I met at the market, Mary the fish vendor. Her son was a partner at a venture capital firm. The day we signed, Haley cried so hard she shook. Rocky, I almost ruined everything. I wiped her tears. You know why you lost? Because you kept staring at Michelin chefs and forgot that homestyle cooking keeps people alive. Tony and his ring were sentenced to up to 7 years. Their confiscated assets covered the factory's unpaid debts and part of BAME's losses. BAME insisted I become his partner. I declined. If I go back to the business world, my wife might never get to eat my sweet and sour ribs again. Since then, people have given me a few new titles. The world's strongest house husband, the cook who destroyed financial scammers, the central node of the farmer's market intelligence network, the genius who cracked a case with a children's smartwatch. Oh, and one more thing. When Tony was jailed, I sent him a box of sweet and sour ribs with a note, eat them while they're hot. Now, Haley has learned to come home on time, and I finally beat Cyberpunk 2077. She loves to lean against the kitchen door, watching me cook. Once, oil splattered up, and she instinctively shielded me with her body. This woman, who once never yielded an inch in negotiations, now lowered her head, counting each red dot burned on my hand. One from the steak, one from the tomato beef stew. Mr. Rocky, you smell like all my favorite dishes. In the garage, the old car we married and finally retired, and a new Rolls-Royce car took its place. The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.